Hello and welcome back to Game Review. My name is Caleb Denby, and today I'm going to be taking you through another game from the World Rapid Championship that just took place in Russia at the end of 2019. So this is going to be a game from Magnus Carlsen, who of course won the World Rapid Championship this year. He actually went home a double champion, winning both the Rapid and the Blitz portions. And today I wanted to take a look at a game that you're not going to see too often. This is Magnus Carlsen against Viktor Laznicka, who is a 2650 level Grandmaster. And I find these games really interesting to look at because, of course, 2650 Grandmasters are very, very strong professional chess players. And the way that Magnus and other top level GMs can pick them apart is very interesting to see. So why don't we take a look and see what happened here. Magnus played d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4, bishop f5, e3, e6. Perhaps some beginners out there will recognize this style of opening, where one player just simply copies the other. But after knight bd2, we do see a deviation with bishop e7, and now there is some imbalance to the game. And this is a pretty uncommon opening, actually. This isn't one that you'll see too often. But what I wanted to talk about with the opening, especially the next few moves, we see knight e5, slightly strange h5 move from black, although it does make some sense. Bishop d3, you'll see that Magnus isn't afraid to trade pieces in the opening. And I think this should be a lesson to take away when you at home are playing a slightly weaker player. You know, just because there are fewer pieces on the board doesn't mean you'll not have any chances to win the game. If Magnus can beat a 2650 Grandmaster after trading off a few pieces, you can beat an 1800 if you're a 1900 level player. So we see this trade occur. Knight bd7, queen e2. This knight comes to e4. We see h3. We see yet another trade. Now after bishop d6, Magnus, not hesitant to trade at all, takes again, and actually castles queenside. So this is the type of position that you might think would be kind of difficult to try and generate some winning chances. Black does have doubled pawns, however they are strong center pawns. Black's going to simply push in the center. You might think, well, there's a half-open c file, but I'm not sure how either side can really make use of it. There's not much to play for, it looks like. So let's see what Magnus really does to generate these chances here. He starts with the move, or Black starts with the move h4, locking down these pawns on the king side. We see king b1 from white. Black maneuvers this knight back towards this e4 square. Magnus does not give him the chance to put it there and plays f3. This is an interesting move to talk about as well. f3, you might be hearing some alarm bells, right? Black has pushed this pawn to h4, creating an outpost on g3. And you might have heard of the power of knights on the 6th rank, or in this case the 3rd rank, but really a knight on g3 would just be out of play here. You see this sometimes. While a knight on e3 or d3 would be very, very powerful for black, a knight on g3 simply isn't really hitting any relevant squares. You force this rook to move, this rook comes to a better square, and then what is your knight really doing there? So Magnus not hesitant at all to prevent the knight from coming to the much better e4 square. Black plays queen b6, we see rook he1, and now black also chooses to castle queenside. Once again, it's very funny to see. This is the type of chess you see between a lower rated player at the class level playing somebody 200 points higher rated than them. You know, it's like, okay, let's trade pieces, let's castle on the same side, let's just get to the most equal position I can, and hopefully I won't lose. And the fact of the matter is, when you play chess like that, the stronger player usually has enough room to prove that he is in fact stronger. The style of chess I've always preferred when playing a higher rated player is to go for complications. Go for the type of position that's so complicated that neither of you can really work everything out, and then you'll both have chances to win the game. Because in positions like this, you really just allow Magnus to do his thing and outplay you. He started with c3, which is kind of interesting, king b8, and now e4. Magnus does in fact break in the center. This is the point of c3 to defend the d4 pawn and allow for this break. After queen c7, Magnus brings this queen out to g5, just poking at the black camp, looking at g7, looking at h4, looking at d5. Black defends this pawn, but is diverting a lot of his pieces to the king's side. Now we see rook c1 from Magnus. One of those mysterious rook moves, perhaps, but it's actually not so mysterious. Magnus technically has a majority on the queen side, and that's the plan he had kind of developed at this point. Eventually, he's going to want to push these pawns forward, attack the black king, and use this majority to his advantage. We see rook h5, and I very much don't like this move from black. You're committing this rook solely to the king side. It's now going to take you at least 2 moves to come back to the defense of your king, and I don't know for certain what the point of having this rook on h5 is. Perhaps you were worried about this queen being over here, but it's just not, it doesn't feel quite right to me. We see queen e3, and now e5 is probably the point of black's play. With the support of the rook, you can break in the center, but after d takes e5 and d takes e5, we see this move c4 from Magnus. And already things are starting to look a little bit uncomfortable. That perfectly balanced level position where, you know, each side has a knight, each side has castled queenside, is starting to look slightly imbalanced. And it's starting to look imbalanced in white's favor. And this is how the stronger player usually ends up winning. He creates an imbalance somewhere and then uses it to his advantage to win the game. Black could have considered capturing this pawn. White likely would have continued with knight c5. And for one, you can consider trying to take this back immediately, but probably you would run into a tactic here with b6. So you do have to be slightly careful. But Magnus might have been considering sacrificing this pawn and then using this open file to his advantage, bringing the rooks into the game. And now you really see why I don't like this rook on h5. It's really causing problems. Black would love to play the move rook c8 here, if this rook were on h8 to support this king, but the rook simply isn't there. So white is going to have pressure on this c-file, and while black is up a full pawn for it, it's definite compensation for white. So perhaps because he was afraid of this line, afraid of Magnus, he plays d4, trying to keep things closed, but this is actually quite good for white now. The reason being, our knight is ideally placed on d3, blockading this d4 pawn, and now we have free reign to run these pawns up the board with a definite majority. And that's exactly what happens. Knight d7, we see c5, this rook comes to h6 now, looking to come back over, but after b4, queen c6, queen b2, queen b5, queen b3 continues to support these breaks, the rook comes to a6. Of course, you know, black doing everything he can to prevent this pawn a4 from coming. White simply brings the knight back to b2, and it will be coming through to devastating effect. The rook now on a6 is doing nothing, as a4 comes anyways. So the rook has to move again to f6. Now after a4, queen c6, the end is coming quite quickly. Very, very natural chess from Magnus. He just pushes his pawns, and the black king suffers. Queen b4, not, of course, trading the queens. This rook comes to c8, and you really see how Magnus has just completely discoordinated the black pieces. It's the type of position you hate to look at. c6, knight b6, a5, knight a8. Disgusting. c takes b7, king takes b7. We see a trade, and now this rook is locked out of play by these very powerful pawns, as well as this queen. This knight is stuck on the a8 square. This queen is getting harassed, and after queen d8, white simply brings his last piece into the attack, and checkmate is coming. We see knight c7, but it's too little too late. Knight c5 check, king a8, and now this pawn breaks through, taking away the final defenders in front of the black king, and checkmating after all. A takes b6, a takes b6, knight a6. You could actually capture this piece. There is a rook takes b6 to look out for, but due to a couple different moves, rook c8 in particular, white would be up a piece. But Magnus sees better. He plays b7 check, and after king a7, knight takes a6 here, and now the threat of b8 is preventing rook b6. So we see rook takes a6, and the final move of the game is rook c8, and black resigns. There's simply no way to prevent b8 queen with a checkmate. And so this is as simple as chess gets at the top level. Magnus let his opponent do what he wanted to do. He said, okay, you want to trade off some pieces? We can trade off some pieces. I'm just going to keep my chances alive. He pushed on the king's side, and Laznicka got checkmated quite quickly and quite devastatingly. Well, thank you very much for joining me again for Game Review. My name is Caleb Denby, and I will see you in the next episode.